Welcome to the Alex Salmond Show from Helsinki. And where better to celebrate Christmas, because if Scotland is the home of Hogmanay, New Year, then it's Finland who's the home of Santa Claus. Now, pedants will tell you that St. Nicholas, history's real-life Santa, is buried somewhere in Turkey. But he actually stays in Finland, in Lapland. So this is the place to celebrate Christmas. And in two special shows from Finland, we asked the question of whether the Finns have found the elixir of happiness, not just for the Christmas season, but all year round, because they pipped their Nordic neighbours to be officially recognised as the most contented society on earth. Today we look at Finnish education. Is the excellence of Finland's education system the real secret behind the elixir of happiness? Next week we look at the Finnish political system. At a time when the UK has been choosing between a 50-something man and a 70-something man, Finland has elected a 30-something woman. Because in Sanna Marin, the Finns have elected the world's youngest Prime Minister, and she leads a coalition of 5 political parties, all of which are led by women. Is the political system the secret of Finnish happiness? But first, let's go back to the election in the UK. Fading from memory now, but this is what our prestigious panel of political pundits made of it. It's fair to say that this Christmas election they think will result in a hangover as opposed to celebrations in Christmases yet to come.
I can see the Tories have led Britain out of the European Union, and it's been an economic and social fiasco with millions of lives ruined by it. I can see this is the one, and I was saying this to my Tory friends all along, the one way you want a far-left government, which Mr. Williamson might feel happy in, is by going for a hard Brexit. Because if you create economic chaos, the left can really use that. And so if it doesn't work, then I think the whole political landscape could be very different in a few years' time than it is now, and it will be much more favourable to the left.
Well, here back in Helsinki, we're asking the question, have the Finns found the elixir of happiness through the excellence of their education system? There's no better person to ask than Olli-Pekka Heinonen, the Chief Executive Officer of the National Agency of Education, a former education minister. And there's no better place to ask that question than here at the Hotel Camp, one of the grand hotels of Europe, built during the Belle Epoque, because it's exactly in that period, in the late 19th century, that Olli-Pekka Heinonen argues laid the foundations for Finnish educational success. Well, Olli-Pekka Heinonen, welcome to the Alex Salmond Show.
Thank you very much.
Now, you've had a long experience in Finnish education, director of the National Agency now, but previously a Minister of Education. Was it really the PISA results, the Programme for International Student Assessment from the OECD when it first came out in the year 2000, was that what shot Finnish education into the international spotlight?
I would say that it did. That's the time when the real interest started. And actually also it a bit changed the discussion in Finland also, because we used to have a lot of criticism internally about our education system, but when the results came, that kind of quieted down, and there was the kind of more calm kind of situation after that. So it really changed a lot of things.
And it must have instilled quite a bit of pride in Finland, a bit like Lassi Viren winning a gold medal when Finnish education was top of the class.
Sure, and I think that is something that has kind of longer roots, the kind of proudness about our education system, because it's kind of bound to the Finnish DNA, that it comes from kind of 150 years ago, when Finland was actually a very poor country. And when first the ideas about Finland one day being an independent nation started. And then there was the idea that what's the best way for Finland to be a nation among nations? And the answer was that if we can raise the kind of cultural and linguistic skills level of the whole population, that is the best way for us to become independent. And that was actually also the means that was taken, the idea to educate everybody in the Finnish society. And that's kind of, it still kind of carries on that same idea that the equality is by far the most important principle in the Finnish education system.
So education as a symbol of collective national achievement. When we see surveys showing not just that Finland is top or near the top of the class for education, but also is one of the happiest countries on earth, perhaps the happiest country on earth, how much of that do you think is Finnish pride in education or parents' security that their children are going to get a decent education? So does education contribute to the Finnish sense of self-esteem?
I would say it does. That in international comparisons, there are 3 areas where Finland is doing well. One of them being education, the human capital. Another one being the kind of security of the society, the kind of stableness. And the third one being equality, whether it's kind of gender equality or other aspects of equality. And I think these 3, they kind of feed each other, and they also create another component which is central, and that's trust. That the Finnish society is a trust society, and it's possible because there is equality in the society, and equality comes through the equal education system, and those are the reasons that create the stability in the society. So it's a kind of a virtuous circle happening there.
Finland, in terms of achieving its educational excellence, I mean, sort of kicks against the accepted wisdom. Finnish students go to school later in life, not until they're 7. They go to school later in the day and have a shorter school day than the international average. Finnish students have less homework. So it seems the very opposite of the other countries which score highly in the PISA rankings, the Far Eastern countries which have a very intensive schooling with very hard work, lots of homework, a drive for excellence. How can Finland achieve what it does, counterfactual, going against the grain of working harder, studying more? How does that work?
We want our children to have a life, that they have other aspects in their life than only going to school, and that understanding that the well-being and learning are strongly connected. That if there's no well-being, there's no learning. If the breakfast is not eaten in the morning, the learning won't happen. And that also kind of is connected to the idea that you have time for your family, you have time to your friends, you have time to hobbies, that it's a kind of a more holistic way of looking what kind of growing into humanity in practice means.
Now, Ole, there's no disputing Finnish excellence, but there must be faults still in the education system, and there's always room for improvement. Mm-hmm. What would you identify as the areas where Finland wants to drive forward to achieve even more?
One thing that needs to change is that in Finland, the teacher, which is kind of a very, very central strength in our system, the teacher profession is a very kind of individualistic profession in Finland. That teachers do their job and work and develop alone. And that we must change. We must get the kind of teachers collaborate much, much more together to create the school community that supports the learning in order to kind of maintain the equality in our system. The schools and the teachers, they need more support structures and mechanisms that we have had earlier. When the change is faster, it means that there's a danger that the kind of cards will be dealt again, and that some will get good cards and some others will get bad cards. And we don't want that to happen. We want to make sure that no matter which school a family lives close to, the closest school is a good school.
And how about higher education and further education? I mean, by international standards, developed countries, the number of Finns going to university is what, 45% or so, which is lower than many countries. Yes. Is that a strength or a weakness? Does that mean you're emphasising vocational education, or does it just mean that Finns want to get out into the world and the workplace as opposed to spending time at university?
Mm-hmm. The thing we are very happy with is that vocational education in Finland is actually very popular. That it's kind of half and half that go to the general secondary and half go to the vocational side, and that's a good thing. But we're seeing that the changes in the working life in the future will mean that we have to increase the percentage of people going to the tertiary level, to the university level, and that's what we are aiming at, to increase those percentages. And at the same time, we must also make changes how the learning in the university sector is happening, that there's clearly a need there also to kind of combine academic and the kind of practical side, the kind of theory practice, kind of involvement and reflection in a much, much stronger way.
How easy is it to translate Finnish education to another society? Is that possible, or really should people remember that Finnish education is a product of Finland, as well as being a good education system in itself?
We don't see that we have the secret of education. We are faced with the same challenges that other nations are. We have a good starting point, but the challenges for futures are kind of similar. And for that reason, we are very committed to international cooperation and development work together with other nations. And I think we can all learn with that kind of an approach.
Now, Ollie, parents across the world watching this programme, worried about how their children are going to do, anxious to see their children do well at school and excel. And I suppose normally they would say, well, work harder, hire a tutor, make sure you do your homework. And then the Finnish example seems to point in the opposite direction. Is there any message you can have to parents across the world as they fret about the future? Is it moved to Finland, or is there something else you could say to give comfort to anxious parents wanting their children to do the best they can?
Well, from the Finnish experiences, I think two things that I would like to say. The first one being that the best thing a parent can do is to be interested in the child's life and learning. And the second one is the thing that we value in Finland, that make sure that we're not kind of stressing our children too much. It's not only that you kind of learn things, but it's also the ability for you that what you can do with what you learned. And there we come to the question again with the well-being, that the child's satisfaction in life is also there, because that's really where the kind of inner motivations to learn new things in the future and kind of prosper in life actually comes from. It does not happen if you're too stressed too young.
Now, in order to celebrate the success of Finnish education, I brought with me the Alex Salmond Quaich. Now, you probably know the drill. Whiskey or other lesser alcoholic substances, but if it's alcoholic, only Scotch whiskey, nothing else works. And then pass it round all your friends and toast the new year in Finnish education.
Thank you so much.
Now, coming up after the break, we answer the question on whether Finnish excellence in education has been built on the early years or on lifelong continuing education. Join us then. Welcome back to Helsinki, and I've just thought of another reason why it's Finland rather than Turkey, which is the real home of St. Nicholas, or Santa Claus. And that, of course, is because there are precious few reindeers in Turkey. And the Finnish Department of Education have just made it official because they've registered Juhlapukki, that's the Finnish celebration of Christmas, with UNESCO. So it's all there and agreed internationally. And it is education that has led the way in Finnish social services. Is that the real reason for Finland being the happiest country on earth? We look first at early education and then continuing education through life. Now, Annalie Raudiainen, you're head of innovation at the National Board for Education in Finland. Finnish education is doing spectacularly well by PISA standards, by international measurement. Now, a number of paradoxes. One of them is that Finnish children spend less time at school, they do less homework than most comparable countries, yet they seem to do better at school. So how do you explain the paradox that Finnish children seem to not to be asked to do as much in formal schooling, but end up with better results?
Well, we believe that it's important that children have time to play and have hobbies and spend time with their parents. So we don't believe that by increasing the amount of time in school or by increasing the amount of homework given, you can get better results. Children are children and they learn by playing, they learn by being their peers and parents. Learning takes place everywhere, not only in the school building.
Now, formal education starts at the age of 7 in Finland, again later than many other countries. But there's a lot of work goes into child development before that. I'm particularly interested in baby boxes, which is a long-standing policy in Finland, recently copied by Scotland. So how is that part of a continuing strand of child development?
I think Finland has supported families very well. In the child box there is always a book, for example, which creates a positive atmosphere for the parents to read to the child since the very beginning. And I think the benefits that we have in the society are excellent.
Now, child box, for our international audience, so this is almost like a cot that's given to each family when they have a child, and it has some goodies in it, things that are useful for bringing up babies. How long-standing is that policy in Finland?
Since 1930s.
So you'd think with all these advantages and encouragement for having children, all these child-centred policies, that the Finnish birth rate would be a bit higher than other countries, but it's actually a bit lower than comparable countries. Can you explain that paradox?
Yeah, we've been discussing this a lot in the society during the past year, and I don't think we know the answer, but when you talk to young adults nowadays, they look at the world and their own life differently. There are issues like climate change, for example, that they consider seriously be one obstacle for having a family. And also the working life is very different now. My generation, for example, we knew that when we had education in Finland, we were guaranteed to have a job. Nowadays, it's different. Young people need to create their own professions and jobs. So all these things seem to be the factors in their mind today why they are hesitant of having children.
And is it the objective of government policy to increase the Finnish birth rate? And has the national agency been discussing how education innovation might help with that?
Well, the national discussion is going on also at the parliament about this, but there are different opinions on that. And of course, the government is trying to support the families also financially. And there is a discussion that maybe we should have a 2-year pre-primary education instead of having 1 year pre-primary education. So this will be looked into now during this government term, and some experiments will begin. At the Finnish National Agency for Education, we haven't been discussing this very much, except that we want the early childhood education and care quality be excellent, and we just are implementing the first curriculum, and we hope that we will get good quality education for every child.
So it's almost 20 years since the PISA, the first PISA, the OECD International Comparator Study was released. When it was released, was that a surprise for Finnish educationalists like yourself, or did you just think, well, that confirms what we knew all along?
It was a surprise. I was attending an international education network in the United States at the time when the first results came out, and all the delegates, including us Finnish, said that this must be a mistake. And so we were very astonished. We didn't really think much of it, but we don't learn for PISA, we learn for life. But since then, we've been very fortunate to have good learning outcomes.
And now looking to the future, as head of the innovation unit, what would be, could you put your finger on one aspect of innovation where you think that's going to be our next breakthrough, where we're going to lead the field in Finnish education?
This is a hard question, but if we don't ask the students what they would like the education system or learning or school be like, then we're missing some innovations that we could build on.
Annalena, thank you so much for giving us that insight. And in order to toast the continuing success of Finnish education, can I present you with the Alex Salmond Quake? It's whisky, only Scotch, in the Quake, and then passed round your fellow educationalists.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm now delighted to be joined by one of Finland's leading educationalists, Professor Ulla Ingerström. Professor Ingerström, well, of course, in days gone by, Scotland was widely seen to have the leading educational system in the world, and that reputation continued long after perhaps evidence suggested that it was slipping back. Are you worried that the same thing might happen to Finland?
It is actually happening to some extent, and I think, yeah, it is a concern. It is even a reason to worry about, because it has to do, especially the greatest strength of the Finnish school system is literacy, basically. We have always been a very literate country for various historical reasons, including the fact that we have been a rather monocultural society in which the Protestant church has had a very dominant position, and the church required that people should be able to read, even to get married.
Well, in that sense, some similarities with Scotland, of course.
Yes, yes.
So in terms of the Finnish approach now, that if we take an analogy with the great philanthropist Andrew Carnegie, you know, who's building libraries across the world to give the working classes of the turn of the 19th and 20th century access to learning. Do Finnish education now stress the ability of students to access through modern technology the information that they need? Is that what is meant by literacy in the modern age?
I'm glad that you took up the example of libraries. You know, Finland has the densest public library network in the world, and every municipality has at least one library, if not more. So it's not only the school system as such, but it's the way these services that promote human capabilities form a kind of an interlinked network of infrastructure and services. And this is too often taken for granted here. If a Finn goes abroad, it realizes that it's very difficult to find a public library, and maybe even more difficult to get access to books if you get to the library.
And does that partly explain the apparent paradox that Finnish education has excelled internationally, despite the fact that Finnish people spend less time at school, have less homework, and seem to be under a much less pressurized environment than many of their contemporaries, for example, in the Far Eastern countries, who spend perhaps twice as long at school and have several times as much homework? Does the reading outside the school environment, is that part of the explanation for Finnish success?
Absolutely. I think part of the explanation is that we have not too much of schooling. Finnish society puts a pretty heavy emphasis on kids' self-determination and even play. The idea is that they have to find their own way, and they have to find their own way to flourish, and that it's not just a single road measurable with grades and so on. So we don't have any national tests. We don't even have any inspections in the schools. Schools are very autonomous in this sense. Of course, that's possible because also the teachers are very highly educated. They all have master's degrees and they are pretty proud professionals. This means that they make the decisions together with the parents and kids. My youngest son is 14 and before this interview he told me, tell them one thing, it's that here they trust us. We call our teachers by the first name, and the idea of taking kids seriously as partners in learning.
And teachers, of course, have a much longer relationship with students in Finland, encompassing several years, as opposed to just a teacher for an individual subject for a period for 1 year. The teachers seem to have a much more developed relationship with their students.
That's true. If you're lucky, the first 6 years of comprehensive school, you have one single teacher. This means that there is continuity. The relationship between the teacher and the students becomes much more, let's say, reciprocal. In many schools, the students already in lower primary grades, they feel that they own the school. This is our workplace. We move here as we want. We are not here to be disciplined. So I think that's a kind of a secret strength. You can't make people learn. They have to find their own way.
Professor, thank you very much. Well, here at the Christmas market in Helsinki, there's more than enough contentment to go round. But Finns seem to have learned the secret, not just of being merry at Christmas, but being merry all year. They say that Finns don't like cutthroat competition, don't like being first in anything. But if that's the case, ironically, it's propelled them to first place in the World Happiness Index as recognised by the United Nations. In terms of education, as we've heard, it's easy to see in practical terms what is attractive about the Finnish system. Parents know that their children will receive at least a decent education, and students know they'll go into life unburdened by tens of thousands of euros of debt. That's reason enough for contentment. But of course, education, as we've also heard, is deeply imbued in the Finnish national consciousness. Being excellent in education is an accolade for the whole country. Next week, we'll look at the Finnish social and political model. Has that also bred contentment? So until you join us then, it's Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year from Helsinki.